I think I've told this story before, so I apologize if you've heard it, but it fits with the readings, I think, pretty well. When I was in seminary in Baltimore, we would have different breaks through the year like any academic institution would do. We'd have a spring break, and we'd have like a little break at Easter, and certainly a break between the semesters between Christmas. And sometimes when I did not come back to Iowa and would stay there, friends of mine who lived on the East Coast would invite me to come and spend a few days with their family. And so it was an opportunity to kind of go to different places and visit different states and different people and such, and I enjoyed that aspect of being able to live in Baltimore at that particular time. So one time I was invited by a friend of mine to come and spend a few days with him in New Hampshire. I think it was over Easter. And so we went up drove up the coast and went up to New Hampshire and spent a few days. And while we were there, we went further up into the States, into the White Mountains, to do some hiking one particular day. And we made our way up the mountain, and if you've ever done any hiking, you know it's kind of a arduous journey sometimes, depending on how high you are going. And we started pretty early in the day, and we went up quite a ways. Probably 8,000 to 9,000 feet, we hiked up this mountain. And we came to a place, and there was just kind of a flat plateau where you could just sort of look out and see, and just miles and miles and miles. And as I think about it now, it must have been in the springtime, because I kind of remember the leaves were turning green, so it must have been around Easter time. So just this beautiful, beautiful sight, and you just wanted to sit there for quite a while and just sort of take in the magnificence of it. And we found a rock to sit on, and we just sort of sat there, never said a word to each other. And probably about after 5 minutes, my friend says, "Do you hear it?" And I didn't know what he was talking about, so I just didn't say anything, and it's like, I don't hear anything. What's he talking about? So I just sort of sat there and I didn't respond. And so then probably about after 30 seconds to a minute, he said it again. "Do you hear it?" So now I'm thinking, it's like, well, we are quite a ways up. Maybe there's a lack of oxygen and he's losing consciousness, and we better come back down the mountain. But, I'm like, "I'm sorry, I just don't hear what you are hearing. What are you talking about?" And that's when he says, "There it is in the silence, that is the voice of God." That was pretty powerful. That probably happened close to 30 years ago, and I still remember that very, very vividly and very clearly. And it reminds me very much of our first reading that Rosemary read this evening about Elijah going to that mountain and standing on the edge of the cave and receiving this message that the Lord was going to be passing by. And Elijah knew this was going to happen, but, like if you would say that, Fred was going to be coming by, I know what Fred looks like. Physical characteristics and such. What does the Lord look like? We don't necessarily know. So Elijah is sitting there, and, there's this strong wind, and Elijah determines, well, the Lord's not in there. And then there's this earthquake, but the Lord's not in there. Then there's this fire, but the Lord's not in there. But in the tiny whispering sound, Elijah hid his face in the cloak and knew that the Lord had come by. And the silence, what a beautiful gift. A lot of times, we probably say to ourselves, it's just like, we wish we could have some sort of an experience, an encounter like that. It's probably part of the reason that some of us are here this evening. It's part of our spiritual life and feeding, who we are as a Christian people, hearing the Word of God and receiving the sacraments, and we're looking for that connection in some way. And the Lord comes to us in many and varied ways. In our gospel today, we have a very different experience and understanding. Jesus had fed the multitudes of people, and said the disciples, "Get in the boat and go to the other side. I'll join you later." And up the mountain he went to spend some time, again in silence, in prayer. And there he is, and then all of a sudden he comes, and the waves start to toss and turn, and the disciples are getting a little bit nervous, and pretty soon here comes Jesus walking on the water. Now that would be an encounter and an experience of the Lord, wouldn't it not? Defying even the laws of gravity and nature, and, here comes this guy walking on the water. No wonder when they got into the boat with them, the disciples all said, "Truly you are the Son of God." That's an encounter and an experience with the Lord. But like Peter, I think that's probably where most of us fit in. We want to believe. We want to think that we have trust.